Welcome, everybody. I'm Sue Landay from Trainers Warehouse, and with me today I have Jamie Thompson from MTA Learning. Jamie and I have been working together for many years now, and he is and his company develop games for leadership development, team building. He has a great suite of resources, and his facilitation notes are terrific. And we wanted to have him talk with the group about how he thinks about delivering experiential learning and debriefing it and what to focus on. So with that, Jamie, I'm going to hand it over to, oh, actually, we wanted to do a couple polls first. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Let's set a baseline and just kind of see where people are at. Let's do that. And while you're doing that, I'll share my screen if that's okay, Sue.
Okay, well, so I just launched this poll, so hold on
Okay.
1 second. Can everybody
Yeah.
see this? Give me a thumbs up. Yeah. Okay. So when are you comfortable using experiential learning? And you can answer, I think, as many of these for icebreakers, for graduate development, middle management, or C-suite execs. Let's see. Okay, we have about 12 of our 16 folks who are on so far have answered. And give it another second or two. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and share the results. All right. Jamie, what do we make of it?
Yeah, so that's interesting, and it's a reasonably typical distribution. So I think the biggest group I've done this with is 400, and so typically about 98% of the people I work with are absolutely confident using experiential learning with icebreakers. But it's such a powerful tool that my mission in life is really to help everybody use it right up to the C-suite. So it's great to see that we've got 5 people on the call that are comfortable doing that. But yeah, let's just see if in the next 15 minutes we can all work together, share some ideas and some techniques so we get everybody using this wonderfully powerful tool right up to the highest levels.
Awesome. Okay, we have one more poll for you guys. Just to kind of level set kind of where we are right now. And this one is, the question is, how long did the debrief of your last experiential activity last? Was it less time than it took for the activity to complete, the same amount of time as the activity, or longer than the activity? This is a good one, Jamie. These questions come from Jamie. So, all right, any other answers before we end the poll? I know it's like takes a little time to go back to where was I? All right, we have 11 responses. Let's see what we've got. All right, Jamie, is this what you expected?
Well, yeah, this is interesting. So what have we got? We've got 36% less time, same time, doing pretty well. I might have expected a few more people to get longer than the activity. I mean, when we think about experiential learning, the debrief is the most powerful part. That's where the learning happens. So again, my mission will be to maybe spend a little bit of time thinking about how we can make our debrief longer than the activity. Rob can't remember. No worries, Rob. Yeah, so yeah, let's see if we can make it longer than the activity. And I mean, if we're working with the C-suite, perhaps a great ratio is even 20%, 80%. So I think that sets us a nice baseline. And just reflecting on that previous poll, what I thought was interesting, I've never seen that before, is that only I think 4 out of 12 were happy using experiential learning with graduate development, and that surprises me. We could maybe explore that afterwards, because I think that's a really powerful application for experiential learning, particularly when graduates come into an organization. They often have technical skills, but what they miss from university is the soft skills, and that's where experiential learning is so good. So I think that's interesting, and I'd be very curious to know why maybe that's when we can share it after I've done a bit of a presentation. But hold that thought, everybody, and I'd love to know why you're not happy using it with graduates.
All right. So did you want to do a screen share and
I will
get us going
do.
here?
Yeah, I'll do a screen share. Right, here we go. So, Sue, can you see my screen?
And yep, all good.
Perfect. Yes. So thank you. So I'm Jamie. I run MTA Learning. I'm a designer, facilitator, inventor of experiential activities. And when I'm not doing that, I'm an organizational psychologist at Leeds Business School with an interest in team working, facilitation, leadership development. And what we are known for as an organization is developing kits like these that Sue very kindly distributes for us. Experiential learning kits that make it easy for you to run powerful experiential learning activities. And so I'll just spend some time thinking about some of the tools and techniques I use that you'll be able to use in your own activities as well, and the kind of things that I've learned over the last 20 years. So to crystallize that, my objective for the session is to just start getting you to think and reflect about how we develop powerful experiential learning activities. Like I think all good sessions, I'd like to leave you in a state of reflection, trying to sort out complexities. I don't want to give you all the answers. For me, very good experiential learning leaves participants in a state of flux, maybe with a bit of tension in their brains or bodies. The learning hasn't stopped. They're still trying to work through ideas and make solutions their own, because I think that's when the learning happens. And so all too often, I see experiential learning with certain solutions. And for me, actually, if we really want to engage people cognitively, we should be doing a little bit more than that. There's lots of different definitions of experiential learning. So just a setting of a baseline, for me, experiential learning is about developing understanding and skills through reflection on personal experience. So it's not about doing a simulation and then being told the answer. It's very much about developing through personal reflection and personal experience. So fundamentally, when we're talking about experiential learning, we're talking about doing two things. We're talking about doing a task and we're talking about doing a review. And so some of the tasks you might be familiar with are the Lego challenge, the NASA moon survival, a very famous 1962 psychology experiment, the marshmallow challenge. If you're not, I've got a kind of free resource on my website, and Sue after the call is going to send out guides, share with you how to run all these activities. And they're all designed in such a way I've kind of adapted them so you can use them at high levels and you can run really long reviews. And then we think about reviews. Some of the methods you might be familiar with are what, so what, now what, stop, start, continue method, and even Lego Serious Play, which I use a lot at the moment. I've got a guide on my website about how to use Lego Serious Play for reviewing experiential learning. But what I'm going to talk to you about today is the MTA method and how we use that. And you can adapt it for your own activities as well, but it covers both task and review. And it's great for those higher levels, so the C-suites, as well as the junior levels, and also for doing those really long, powerful reviews that are going to get results in your organization. So I'd just like to start by getting you to think about the marshmallow challenge. Are you all familiar with the marshmallow challenge? Yeah, I can see a few nods. So if you're not, you get participants to build a spaghetti and a marshmallow tower. You've got 10 minutes to do it, and then you review it. So what do we think about that activity? You can just drop it into chat. We don't have a poll, but give me an A if it's love it, B if it's okay, C if better than nothing, D if never, or E if you've never heard of it. Have we got anything coming through in the chat, Sue? I can't actually see it when I've got.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
here we do it. Yeah, I'll look on my other screen.
Yeah, ACD. I feel like it's all over the place. It's overused. I've never used it. Inexpensive.
Yeah.
I love
Never
it.
heard of it.
I think we're all over the map.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
A lot of
that's
it's
because
okay.
yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
Mhm.
Like it overused. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, for me, it's okay. It's kind of like average. It's the right idea. But I think we can do much better. But the question is why? Why is that? Because we can learn some valuable lessons about why it's only okay, which can help us design much better experiential activities. So if we think about the marshmallow challenge, you're getting people to build a tower spaghetti marshmallows, and what happens? They get sticky fingers. The engineers do lots of things. You create triangles, and it's very task heavy. There's an awful lot of interaction with the parts, and you typically get the same results. There's one standard way to do it, and what you don't get is much process. So you don't get the really valuable bit, which we need to create powerful experiential learning. So you don't get much cognitive engagement with the task. You don't get the kind of the different verbal and social processes that are so interesting for us as facilitators. So
Jamie,
you might say,
a quick question. When you're talking about that process, do you mean like the planning up front, or how are you, I guess, how are you defining what the process is versus like the task seems really obvious to me.
Yeah, so if we think about the process, it's everything which is social. So planning is a social process. It happens within the group. Leadership is a social process. It's a social construct. It happens within the group. Our thinking is process. The task is the actual interaction. It's the physical things we need to do to build the tower.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah. And so in the Marshmallow Challenge, when we look at that as an activity, there's an awful lot of this task work. All hat, no cattle, makes it difficult for us for facilitators to develop really good learning. I can see someone has put the link into the chat. That's a nice, I think it's a Polish guy who has that YouTube video. And it's nice. You can look at that and it's a defined outcome, and he tells people what they've learned afterwards, which for me isn't fantastic experiential learning. So what we like to do, and I'm sure Sue would endorse as well, is do things a little bit differently. What I like to do is design activities with multiple outcomes. So activities with multiple solutions with a very limited component set. I might get, for example, participants to thread components onto a rope in a certain sequence. So very intangible as well, but cognitively complex. And also without favoring predefined skills like engineering. So if you think about that versus the Marshmallow Challenge, what you're effectively doing is designing tasks that are very process rich, but in terms of a task are as simple as possible. And what that means is people can leave the task behind, and just when you start to facilitate, they're going to be focused on the process. They're not going to be worried about their marshmallow tower falling over. They're not still going to be thinking about how they can have done a better marshmallow tower. They're going to be thinking about how they can be better leaders, how they can be better team players, and how they can be better communicators. So my first kind of challenge or hint to you is there enough process in the tasks that you're designing, you're delivering to create a really powerful learning platform? And a good way to test this, if you're having to frame your activity up front, if you're having to tell participants what they might learn, or if you're having to tell participants what they learned, then probably not. You might just need to go back and reflect and change the way you're designing your activities. So if we were to do a really good experiential activity, I'd be curious to know about the kind of questions people might ask afterwards. So if we were to do a really interesting experiential activity, a really rich process, what question would people like to open with from that list there? Got a couple of D's, D, E, D, D, O, C, yeah, D, or A, B. Another B, E. Yeah, it's interesting, quite a wide spread again. So we've got a very diverse group today. Lovely. So
what strikes me though is A, the asking right away specifically, what did you learn? Nobody's, nobody's has written that. So in some way or another, we're easing into things a little differently, but tell us.
Yeah, well, no, I think all those questions have their place. Absolutely. I mean, I think, yeah, you're right. A is a bit of a trap. It's a question I often see facilitators ask really early on, far too early on. Well, nothing, because we haven't discussed it yet. We haven't reviewed it yet, and that's a great way to cut a review really, really short. So, it's the early poll. If your reviews are short, then what are the kind of questions you're asking? I think B is also an interesting one, and maybe it's a bit too early to ask that question. C, what should you continue doing? Or again, we maybe do a bit more evaluation of the task first. How did that go? I think that's a good question. I think it can sometimes invite a critique of the task. So if we're given a really difficult task to participants, you can sometimes get a defensive reaction. I think so. For me, my favorite style of question is a style along the theme of questioning. And of course, you do it in your own style, but I like that one because it's process focused. And as facilitators, how do we model the behavior and get people to think about process, not tasks? So how did you go? We built a lovely marshmallow tower. What behaviors enabled your team to complete the task? Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, we had to communicate leadership. So actually, how are we just as facilitators getting people to reflect on what we want them to reflect on what's important, rather than perhaps what they're still interested on, which is the marshmallow tower. So, yeah, my favorite. And then if we start to ask these process questions, we're starting to open up the discussion into all the kind of areas that can be really interesting for people in higher parts of the organization. So the kind of things that are going to be more interesting to the C-suite, because they're really not interested in necessarily how high they built their tower. So my second kind of challenge and hint is to what extent are our questions process focused? So how to what extent are you guiding your participants onto what's important? Because if you can do that, then you're going to get data from participants, which they believe. But then there's a bit of a cultural piece there. So can you give up control? Can you hand over that control to participants, again, thinking about their own learning, but also will your learners embrace the freedom? Or will they just say to, tell us what should we've learned? And actually, culturally, that can be quite difficult in many organizations as well. So you might need to take people on that journey and introduce them to that process of participant-centric learning. So far, so good, Sue?
I'm sorry, one
Yes?
sec. Do you find that cultural difference unique to an organization, or is it different, based on region, whether in the UK or in the US, or are we talking, levels of the organization, whereas younger folks in an organization might be more likely to express themselves versus senior? Are you talking about the facilitator feeling like who's control? I guess I have a lot of questions still. Maybe I'm the only one.
No, that's great, Sue. And if you reflect back to my introduction, it was to leave you in that kind of state of reflection and developing your own questions and trying to tease out the complexity of what we're doing with experiential learning. So perfect. All those. So in terms of culture, every single dimension you mentioned is different and affects people's reaction to experiential learning. So if I run an experiential learning session in Scandinavia, participants' expectations are very different. If I run a experiential learning session in the center of the US, but also the second dimension that would also be like versus the United Nations versus Verizon versus Enron versus Aramco. So yeah, it's very different. And it's about understanding that culture and understanding where your participants are at and adapting your approach and taking people on that same journey. In terms of giving up control, yeah, it's about facilitators giving up control.
It is a scary thing about remember when you're doing a facilitation and you're doing a review, like you don't know what they're going to say, especially if it's a new activity that you're running for the first time. Like, what's going to come out of this? It's like there's a little anxiety with that. I don't know if other people feel that also.
Yeah, absolutely. And if people want to read more about that, there's a facilitator called John Heron who talks a lot about it and about making sure that when you're starting your facilitation journey, you're starting off as a kind of a god of the Greek god Apollo, so you're putting lots of structure to keep it safe. But as you move through your journey, you can be the god of wine and chaos and put in a lot less structure that you're comfortable
And
with.
what was
I think
that
someone had
name?
that. Sorry.
What was his name?
I think my Greek isn't great. Dionysian, maybe someone knows better than me on the call. But the god of wine and chaos. I think Wendy had her hand up. Wendy, is that right? Or was it a thumbs up?
Yeah, I was just agreeing with Susan. Sorry about that.
Yeah, yeah, no worries.
Okay,
um,
great.
Super.
We'll
So
collect that in our notes that we share with people.
so then we've done an activity, we've done a lovely process activity. We're starting to get people to take ownership of their own learning. We've given up control of facilitators. We've introduced a common language. We're using really great open process questions. And then I think if you're using it at higher levels, then what people often aren't doing is using activities which are complex enough in terms of the processes they can introduce. So Sue's got some lovely activities. This is an activity called Over the Bridge. And it starts to introduce stakeholders, ambiguity, different priorities, time constraints, multiple phases, subtasks, change, negotiation. So all the kind of things that are going to resonate with the challenges that the C-suite or people in the higher levels of your organization are facing. Because if experiential learning is going to sing, you need to have that environmental alignment between your activity and your organization and the demands and expectations of the organization. And so often I find that the tasks people are using just don't have enough intellectual complexity in them to be relevant. So we get pushback and we have short reviews. So we can do that. And this is
No,
another.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to jump in again. So that's
yeah, no, please do. This is
also
much more interesting than me just talking away. So go for it.
well, that's the concept of that intellectual complexity. It like I guess this is the key to the whole thing. So probably silly for me to reiterate it, but what the heck? When you are working with C-level and higher level groups, the fact that you have this complexity, partly it's about the review, but it's also just to engage them and to help them understand that this is kind of worthwhile of their time. So I just think it's interesting how your whole approach sort of holds together in terms of what you're talking about. So thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Good experiential learning needs to be, for senior people, needs to be incredibly cognitively demanding, and it needs to create incredibly complex process, because that's exactly what happens in organizations. The challenge is, how do you create that cognitive complexity within 20 minutes? Because that's the only amount of time you get C-suite for, and that's the real challenge. But done well, it can actually really make the most of that incredibly valuable time they're taking out from their organization. No, thank you for flagging it, Sue. That's an absolutely key point. So this is another review question I see a lot. What should you stop, start, continue? Similar to the what, so what, now what model. And I did a complex activity with some senior people in the military, train the trainers, and they were absolutely adamant they were going to use this review question when they did it with their people. But again, it'd be interesting if anyone has any thoughts on that question, drop them into chat. But for me, although it's such a commonly used approach, it's also incredibly superficial as well. And so again, if we're going to use experiential learning at more senior levels, we need to really up our game in terms of what we're doing. So what I like to use is I call it the jaws model, kind of opening the jaws and shutting the jaws. And it's very deliberately about creating complexity. So we open up the discussion, we take the ideas, they get tangled, they get worked through, they get teased out, and then they get shut down again. But before that, we also have individual reflection. And if we have that individual reflection, what we are doing is enabling people to crystallize their ideas, crystallize their thinking, but also allowing us as facilitators to introduce further complexity in terms of the questions we're asking, the theories we're covering, and the cognitive demands we're placing on participants. So we can do that by using predefined questions that match into theories. And I can send you an example around after the call. But if you compare this to stop, start, continue, this approach, for example, the first question, when did you do your planning? What plans were agreed? Then we're thinking about tying plans into personal objectives. So moving from team to individual, think about organization, think about different roles. So suddenly we're starting to do an awful lot in terms of approach, in terms of getting people to think broadly about how they performed in an activity, far more broadly than some of the simpler review approaches that maybe people are more familiar with. And for me, what's really important is to link these individual questions to really robust theory. And I'll share this model after the call as well. This is my favorite model of team development. It's by a professor, an English professor called Peter Hawkins. And if you reflect back to those questions, what you can see is what I'm trying to do is link individual questions after a debrief to really robust and powerful theory. So this is a lovely model of how teams work. We have the task at the top. So this is actually about how we define a task. We have the teamwork, the process at the bottom. We have what's external to the team and what's internal to the team. And so you can start to think, well, how well did people commission a task? That relates back to the planning question. Did people set objectives? Okay, maybe. Or did they clearly get a clear commission from the customer? Maybe. But then did they go to the team within the team and get clarification and alignment? Did they set KPIs? Then within the execution phase, what were the dynamics like? What was the culture like? What was the communication like? So often experiential learning, we're just touching on that bottom left quadrant. There's so much more to teams. And then finally, to what extent do we maintain relationships with our stakeholders and with the external kind of environment which is happening around our team as well? And hopefully we're doing that in an environment of learning as well. And so we're not just doing one experiential learning, we're sequencing multiple activities together and helping teams understand how good they are at learning and applying lessons. So the challenge here is to what extent or how successful are you at linking your activities and debriefing to robust theory? If you're linking it to really robust theory and you are giving participants a structure to think in, that's when you'll really be able to make it sing with the C-suite and get those really kind of long duration reviews. So to summarize that process, we need to, if we're going to really do powerful experiential learning that leaves people in that reflective state, we need a powerful learning platform that's really process rich, that's ambiguous, that's aligned with the complexities of our customers' environment. We need individual thinking time, which is aligned with robust theory. And then we need to be reviewing with open-ended process questions, opening the jaws, exploring things with multiple follow-up questions, and then drawing conclusions about the activity, and then finally transferring to the workplace. This is the so what piece. And again, if you have used the material Sue's got, the MTA system, you have worksheets to guide you and help you link learning back to the workplace. So hard to do. Sue's got this kit which makes it easy for you. It's called MTA Insights. So she could tell you more about that later. So hopefully, where are we? This for me is a nice thing about experiential learning, where I'd like you to be. There's no closure, but the niggling and jarring condition of uncertainty. So they are not finished. Like a pebble in a shoe, it just kind of keeps on nibbling at you or irritating your foot in the same way that Sue was kind of thinking and trying to work out what I was saying and how it applied to what she already knew and her kind of mental model. So I hope I've given you something to think about. We'll share lots more resources after the call. It's been super rushed, but you can always reach out to me with any more questions. And so now, yeah, hit us with any questions or anything you'd like to share on the topic of debriefing or running experiential activities.
And I want to give folks a little time to either put your questions into the chat or just kind of raise your hand. I know we're at the half-hour mark, so I do want to kind of formally thank Jamie for being with us, and that was so rich and useful. We're able to stay on the call a little bit longer, and if you can stay on as well, join us for a little bit of Q&A. If you need to jump off, we totally understand. So thank you, and let's get, I know David just asked a question. Let's see what we got. What's the commitment to theory understanding do you expect your participants to have pre, during, post experience? Are you pushing deductive insight testing or inductive insight recognition or abductive insight development? I don't know, David, you might have had to do this one verbally.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting point, David. I think it would really help us if you could just give the layman's definition of deductive versus inductive and abductive, and then I can talk about it. Is that, and maybe just a bit about your thinking behind it? That's an interesting one. Have we still got David?
Yeah, he's written. Oh, go ahead. Are you able to share with us verbally? So I don't have to read what you wrote. I think you're on mute. Let's see. One sec. Can you unmute?
Yep, there we go.
There we go. Thank you.
Yeah, so Jamie, thanks again. You were sharing quite a bit of deep facilitation theory, which is really helpful. But it seems like, based on the survey at the beginning, that it was very focused towards the highest level of facilitation with some of your deepest thinkers and people who would most likely either be in organizations that are paying for high dollar facilitation, can afford high dollar facilitation, and are doing activities in person. So they're doing experiential learning in person. I just picked up one of those insights kits for our business school. And so I'm deeply interested in this kind of processual approach to experiential learning. We do a lot of experiential learning with simulations. And so I'm listening to what you've shared, and I'm thinking, how much are my participants going to need to know about the theory of what they're experiencing before, during, or after the experience to be able to process it sufficiently to feel like the facilitation experience was the dollar they spent, they got it?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think you can both approaches are absolutely valid. So you can introduce the theory, and you can use the kits or experiential learning to bring that theory to life, or you can do an activity. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, but then it would be an inductive approach to get people to almost develop theory from that activity. And then, so you do an activity from your insights kit on leadership. It's an activity which demands different leadership styles at different times. So you get people to reflect on the impact of their leadership styles at different times during a task, the readiness of their participants, the appropriateness of their style versus the readiness of the participants. And all of a sudden within your group, you have situational leadership coming to life, and they've thought about it and they've processed it. Now, that's a really valuable thing for a high-level group to do. Conversely, you could introduce a theory of situational leadership and then do an activity which brings it to life in a really practical sense. You could do a psychometric, which helps people understand their roles within teams, and then do an activity which brings their almost like numbers or their position on the spectrum to life by looking at how they act in a practical sense. So both approaches are valid, and I think, to what extent do I expect people to have pre-existing theory? It works at any level. I've used it in prisons, and I've used it at the highest levels in organizations. I've used it with PhD students. I've used it with my squirrels who are about 4 years old and little Beaver Scouts, and it works. It's just about adapting the processes and the questions to take them on their journey. Everybody goes through the same cognitive process. It's just we treat it at a different level of complexity. But yeah, really interesting point. Thank you.
Very interesting. Yeah, and the adaptability to, to different groups, to different ages, to different depths of focus. So, I can imagine that if you're at a C-suite versus more middle managers, you could probably run the same activity and debrief it differently, or, how you bring out those learning points might differ, and how you tie it to theory, you may either drop it or not, depending on how it's appropriate or inappropriate for the group. Interesting. Other questions? And Jamie, I was just trying to do a stop your screen share, but I'm not sure if that's working. But
there we go.
There we go. There we go. Any other questions, folks? This has been really interesting and thoughtful. I appreciate the perspective.
I have another one, if you have time.
Please.
Yeah, go for it.
All right, and that is in the process of taking a high-level team through various experiential activities, do you have kind of like a wins-loss column of your practice of which kinds of activities you sequence in the certain order so that you get either the most insights, enlightenment from your participants, or the greatest sense of that was a magical experience? Because part of it, as you know, is both they learn stuff, but it's also they take away this sense of they learned stuff. They changed. They literally became something different. And is there a recipe that you've kind of finagled over time of we run leadership activities first, and then we do teamwork and communication, and then we do innovation, or we do innovation first, and then leadership, and then teamwork, and then communication, or a certain ordering that you see tends to drive the most intellectual as well as personal emotional change?
Yeah, so I think in terms, I do. I have a recipe. I don't have a certain sequence of activities because it's so contextual. But there's things I want to do in terms of my design. So I want to first of all help people develop a common language to talk in. So I want people to just reflect on basic process. Even senior people often find that difficult. So you ask a manager what effective team working looks like, they say, yeah, listening to each other, and we don't have the language yet to be able to really articulate ourselves to the level that they need to articulate themselves. I need to help them become comfortable with reflection. I need to introduce a culture of reflection in the group as well. So there are some baselines I need to set. I need to help them understand I'm not going to be doing the thinking, they're going to be doing the thinking. And then I can start introducing the topics. I think in terms of introducing topics, there's two dimensions for me to work on. There's clarity of problem and clarity of solution. And if I've got really super bright people, I can introduce activities with really unclear problems and unclear solutions. So they need to first do some problem definition. They need to sort through complexity, deal with ambiguity. They need to define the problem accurately, and only then do they need to start being more solution orientated. So that's almost like the highest quadrant. But if I'm working with more junior people, I might start with activities where the problem is already defined, and the only thing they need to do is define the solution, because I think that dimension is very indicative of the process complexity they'll need to be comfortable with, and also their cognitive abilities as well, their abilities to work together and create almost like sensible group cognition. I can help you with any particular sequences you want as well, David. So if you say, look, I've got MBA students doing X or Y, just reach out to me and I'll chat to you about a good sequence for you.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions? Benita, I can't tell if you're speaking or not. Nope. Okay. Oh, good. Anybody else? All right. Well, we'll wrap it up there. Jamie, thank you. This has been really great, interesting. I can't wait to kind of put our notes together and send a follow-up email to folks with some of these resources and thoughts, really. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Do reach out to me. Keep in touch. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to chat experiential learning, and particularly if you've already got the kits, then very happy to help you out and help you make the most of them.
All right. Have a good day, everybody.